So now I've entered the stage where we need to start to clean up the high poly mesh a little bit. Sometimes I kind of rush through and just get it done, just get the shapes in place. So I like the design, but the reality is that sometimes the high poly is not as clean as it could have been, to say the least. And there is some pinching on this mesh actually that I don't fully resolve, but it turns out okay in the end. This area, well, that I was just working on, that was the real problematic part. So, it's interesting watching these videos. You get a good look at the realities of what making game art is, and it's not always so pretty as it is, or as it's shown in tutorials sometimes, where you have the perfect concept art and everything goes totally smoothly according to the blueprint and all that. Oftentimes you just have to wing it and just make it work. This part here, this is the part that I had a real problem with the pinching on. I think I come back and work on this a little bit later too, but this is me not using enough geometry on this piece. I was trying to get away with minimal sub D, and I should have just bitten the bullet and just added more or used booleans or something, but I was being stubborn. But it doesn't much matter because it turns out okay in the end, and that's really what the important thing is. That as long as the client's happy with how it turned out, then it's all good. Okay, so I think I finally reached a point with this where I'm relatively happy with how it looks, and I can get going on the rest of it. Yeah, here I was thinking, I'm like, well, those edges are pushed under too far, and they're going to be difficult to bake out like that. So I'm making some adjustments now to give it a bit of a edge that will make the low poly creation easier in the end. Here too, that's tucked under too far, so I want to just kind of pull it out and give it an edge so it'll show up nicer later. This is all the kind of stuff you pick up through experience and just making mesh after mesh after mesh. You start to develop these these habits, and this stuff just becomes kind of second nature after a while. Your subconscious brain will be like, oh, don't do that because you're going to have a problem later, or hey, maybe you want to pull that edge out because you screwed that up in the past, so let's not repeat history here. All the negative talk your brain wants to do, but it can actually be helpful. Yeah, I decided that the trigger area here was a little too hard edged, to look good. That looks a little more natural. Now it's just a matter of hardening up the edges on these inset panels and just trying to get those to look the way I want them to look. This too, it is a case where I probably should have used more geometry. You find that's a recurring theme with me. I tend to want to do like more with less, and it's sometimes is not always the smoothest workflow, but you're always learning as an artist, and you're always developing new habits along the way, and that's just something that I have to get better about. All right, so now I want to get this magazine sorted out because Oh, okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm going through and I'm determining what can be mirrored right now and what where I can save texture space on the low poly. You know, because if I can get the more that I can mirror and the more that I can share, the more texture res the piece will have in the end. So this is me determining which faces are actually visible, which ones can be mirrored, not too noticeably, and just making plans for the low poly essentially. There's some stuff in here that I think I could have cut down more than I did, but in the end, it comes down to a balance between the hassle involved with making the low poly and getting the bake to look correct, and just having something that's a little more than it needs to be. And sometimes too, you don't want to mirror things that are completely obvious, like, and by that I mean like completely obvious to the to the player, because if there's a big, let's say, rounded piece that goes around the top of your gun or top of a car or a car hood or something, mirroring in that situation is going to be kind of ugly because there's likely going to be some butterfly effects that run along the seam. You'll have to paint them out. And it means, obviously the left and right side of it are going to be identical, which might be very obvious if someone's looking at it. But stuff that's on the opposite sides of the gun is not going to be as noticeable, simply because you don't see them both at the same time. So when choosing to mirror things, you have to choose, well, basically you got to pick your battles. Now here I think I'm adding some cuts in, just slicing through the mesh to give it a little more tooth so I can get in here and try to adjust this piece so it doesn't stick directly into that grill guard below. And it's really, yeah, it gives me a bit of a pain, but I think I end up using the FFD, yeah, there we go, the FFD kit to massage it to my will, just good enough that it doesn't completely penetrate. Yeah, I would strongly recommend this FFD kit to anybody. I've got a video on it in the Quick Tips playlist. It's definitely a valuable addition to any tool set. And I think that's all we're going to show of the cleanup phase, but you get the idea. You go through, you pick your mirroring, you clean up the sub D where you can, and try to set yourself up for success. Thanks.